Hoki mai no, welcome back. It is time for our panel. With us today, Sarah Sparks, Andrea Vance and Jenny Marcroft. Tēnā koutou, welcome to the program. Thanks for your time. Let's get straight into it. It's been a testing week for the new Health Minister. Dodgy data, blown out waiting times. Andrea, does she give you confidence she's on top of the challenging portfolio? That's a no already.
Yeah, I didn't get a lot from that interview, I have to say. I mean, she made all the right noises. And I suppose, if you're being fair, she's new to the job. However, you know, there is a collective responsibility in Cabinet. A lot of these problems are long-standing. They haven't been solved. Just because we have a new minister, they're not immediately going to be solved. And I think a lot of what she said, she's got a good heart and her heart's in the right place. But if you're sitting in ED at the moment waiting 6, 7, 8 hours, your child is sick, if you're struggling to access mental health services, for instance, none of the things that she said will have been of any help to you or probably not inspire any confidence. Right,
so I just wonder, Jenny, is she connecting to the audience? Is it more bureaucratic, her response? Or is she actually making a connection to the people that need the services the most?
Well, I think she is... she's right across her portfolio. She comes from a really solid background in health, so she knows the machinery of health. She's also, you know, taken on this portfolio partway through the health reforms. And if we think about the workforce issue, which has been plaguing the government for the last couple of years, particularly through COVID, you know, we have an international deficit of health workers around the world. So we're not isolated in this. We're competing in a market where big economies are already fighting for that workforce.
That's right.
We can't compete dollar for them. All we've got is New Zealand. It's a great place to live. Come and work here. So there are some challenges outside her control.
But she did push back on that. Sarah, she was saying that, you know, we've got, you know, 1,700 doctors, 4,000 nurses, acknowledges it's not good enough. And so I found her that she did push back a bit in that interview about those kinds of things. And she also talked about the mental health resources, saying they've got an excellent program now. So, you know, she's a PhD in public health. She's got the overview, but is she going to connect to the people on the ground, say to Tairāwhiti or wherever, who need services on the ground?
Well, firstly, I think that she's got a grip of what's happening, and she's only been in the driver's seat for a very short time, so we've got to be fair.
All right.
And she is trying to work at pace. I'm looking at her, and it needs surgery before rehab, and she's making some surgical decisions, but at the end of the day, she's only as good as the engine around her. So there's a huge responsibility here for the strategy that's happening at Health New Zealand. What are the priorities? Let's get pragmatic. There needs to be some action going in terms of frontline primary care, and that dovetails into what you're saying about mental health and all the programs. You know, what is the strategy? And it needs to flex. It needs to be adaptable to these constant changing conditions.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of those. Are they being quick enough, though, Andrea, in terms of rolling out a plan to support Kiwis who have been through all these multiple disasters?
I mean, no, clearly not.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, if you're looking at it from a political point of view, there's a very short runway to the election. I can't imagine that anything she's going to do going into what's going to be a pretty tumultuous winter for the health service is really going to make that much difference for people who are thinking about their voting priorities in October.
So is this, Jenny, going to be a weak point for the government? Just like Andrea says, it's a short runway into the election, multiple disasters and a bad winter coming.
Oh, absolutely, and it's got to be, you know, the front of mind for the minister, because we have these reforms. You know, the legislation in place, pie orders there, the entities have been established, but we haven't seen yet what is the model of care. You know, we've got a restructuring document that hasn't landed yet. Te Whatu Ora has not made that public yet, so there's all of these things still to play out. And when we get that model of care, then we're going to be able to know, okay, how is primary care going to be integrated and sucking up more of these patients to stop them ending up in secondary care. All of those issues will become revealed, but we don't know what is yet going to happen, and this is what it's been like, a holding pattern for the last couple of years.
OK, well, we'll hold on and wait and see what happens then. Keep the holding pattern going. Let's move on to wetlands. Andrea, I just want to come to you first. You've extensively covered this. When you were doing reporting on sort of the slight rollback in wetlands regulations, what did you make of the government's sort of move there? I mean, we've heard from Forest and Bird saying, you know, they're two-faced and they've been lobbied by industry to make those changes.
I mean, I guess on one level it was shocking to me because I sort of learned about it in the aftermath of the Auckland flooding and when the cyclone was bearing down on us. So we were I was obviously very, as most of the country was, very aware of you know, the risks of building in certain places and the damage that flooding can do. On the other hand, I wasn't surprised, because any time that the government tries to do any kind of environmental protection, the sheer weight of industry lobby comes down on them. And I've been doing this reporting for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's just a pattern. It doesn't matter what government is in office. And so this week, for the Sunday Star Times, I spent the week looking at submissions on the new bills that will replace the RMA. So quite a tedious week for me.
Yeah, no, that's nitty-gritty stuff for you.
Yeah, and so you're already starting to see with that legislation the same pattern emerging. So, you know, people are unhappy that the environmental protection contained in that bill isn't clear enough and is subject to lots of exemptions and trade-offs. And what was really interesting is a lot of the industry submissions mentioned this wetland issue.
Really?
And they use an example of, oh, well, you got it wrong. We don't want to see that happen again. We don't want the government to put in protections that make life unworkable for us. So you can't get, when it comes to trying to protect nature and the critical natural infrastructure that we have, it's almost impossible.
So industry is using what's happened with the wetlands rollback as a precedent for contesting the RMA reforms. Sarah, I mean, we're talking about only 10% of wetlands, natural wetlands remaining in New Zealand. And as again, Nicola Toki said, you know, a lot of it is Māori whenua, where the livelihoods and the kai have been taken away. And so should there be greater protections around them?
Absolutely. Wetlands are our lungs of Papa Tuanuku. You know, this is a values-based kōrero. We need leadership in government to make the hard, ballsy calls to say, we're not going there. It's too late once the legislation gets tinkered with to argue it in court. And quite frankly, you know, my hapu have been fighting to protect our wahetapu in Nelson. And it's too late and it's too expensive. They actually need to listen to local community, they need to listen to mana whenua and do it properly the first time. And that is prioritising Mother Nature. Because, you know, I was listening to you in the interview around what's happening in the city. How relevant is it for the people in the city from their perspective? Well, you just got to look at what happened in Christchurch, you know, with liquefaction and, you know, property developers coming in on the fringes and building all these beautiful developments, but then, you know, places cop it. So we need to get real, we need to get pragmatic in that area as well.
Okay, I'm going to move on to, I mean, we're talking about politics and lobbying. Let's talk about the politics of the people. A national front and centre this week, targeting consultants and contractor wasteful spending by the government. Did that strike a chord, Jenny?
Not with me, no.
Why not?
I just felt that it was, you know, we do know that when you've got a massive change program in government, you are going to have more consultants. So if you look at the health sector, how many people have been poured into that to work through these reforms? I personally, yes, maybe there could be a bit of tinkering around the edges, but not, you know, not when they're putting up what was quite a good policy in terms of the early childhood.
So is it yeah, so putting up a good policy, and then they go down that. Is it just Andrea, is it an easy hit for an opposition party just to go straight in for like consultancy fees?
Yeah, I guess, and you know, hats off to National, they probably did dominate the conversation a little bit. That with this week, I mean, as Jenny says, I'm not sure that it resonated with a whole lot of people outside comfortable Wellington households.
Right, okay.
But it goes back to, as Jenny said, it is actually quite an interesting policy worth talking about, and why they felt that they had to have this kind of cost trade-off. You know, if you want good outcomes, you have to spend the money. But we're in this cycle of trying to prove that you can cost something and afford it. But I did think it was an odd choice of a policy launch for a State of the Nation speech, your big flagship speech of the year where you set out your priorities. You know, obviously childcare is a good one, but consultants, I'm not sure that should have been something.
All right. Sarah, we've seen like the two Chris's go head-to-head in the House now. I mean, you got any feeling of how they're squaring up? Okay. Does your silence say more than words? Or you don't care?
I'm at the flex roots, and you know, I'm about what actually is happening to the real people down at the flex roots, and you know what goes on in the House and the optics of it. For me, it's about you know, the leadership and the decisions that are affecting real people on the ground.
All right, but I am going to ask you guys, Jenny, Chris v Chris, who's coming out on top so far?
Oh, definitely it's the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister?
The Leader of the Opposition, through his State of the Nation speech, within 2 minutes I noticed I was cleaning the kitchen cupboards, which you know, kind of says it all, really. Does he capture New Zealand?
Okay,
Not
and
really.
just quickly, we're just going to run out of time. Andrea, Chris v Chris, we've seen a bit of a bump in the polls for Labor, but it's still National going to form a coalition. So is Chris Hipkins going to get him over the line or not?
I mean, super close. I wouldn't want to call the election. I don't think that would be a bad idea at this point. But I do think what's interesting is that Jenny's kind of gut reaction is built into the polls, and you're starting to see when it comes to Chris Hipkins' favourability ratings, that's now a built-in trend. So if I was Christopher Luxon, I'd be quite worried and, you know, focusing intensely on turning that around, getting people to like him.
Okay, we will leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much to our panel, Jenny Marcroft, Andrea Vance and Sarah Sparks. Kia paku whakatā tātou. Stay with us. We will be back after the break.